Fear not. I'm Jessica Denson, and this is Lights On. What a week for tiny men. Donald Trump, the lowest of the low, who's running from a felony conviction relating to his tryst with a porn star, reposted the most crude attacks yet on Kamala Harris, suggesting, I hate to even describe this, but that she got on her knees to get where she is. You sick, jealous little man. You must not have heard her when she said that you will not define her. All you are doing, Donald Trump, is defining yourself. His repugnant running mate, twisted campaign, and Fox News acolytes are all in on this vile war on women. I hope any children, sisters, mothers with men in their lives who for 1 second could buy into this sickness would urge them to reconsider any support they may have for this ticket. But they're all in. They're all in. MAGA's all in on this war on women, and nowhere more so than at Arlington Cemetery, where on Monday, felon Trump trampled on the graves of our fallen heroes to stage an illegal campaign photo op, and, according to a very rare statement from the Army, physically assaulted a female cemetery worker. Someone on his campaign, according to the Army, physically assaulted a female cemetery worker. Now, of course, the Trump campaign lied out of the gate when NPR broke news of this altercation earlier this week, trotting out the most repulsive gaslighting defenses. The Trump campaign called the woman, quote, despicable. And spokesperson Stephen Chung said she was having a, quote, mental health episode. I have news for you, Stephen Chung. Your entire campaign is a mental health episode. They have promised video footage to back their claims, but we haven't seen anything yet. What are you afraid of, Trump campaign? Release the video. Now, pressure is also mounting for the Army to release a full report of the woman that the woman filed. She has so far declined to press charges, fearing retribution. Now, this is such a serious situation that we are facing as a country, and I understand how scared and overwhelmed this woman must be. But I've also been there, facing unthinkable intimidation from the Trump campaign to shut up and stay in the shadows. I have been lied about by that very man, Stephen Chung. He may look quite large, but he too is a very tiny man. These bullies, their only hope is that you take their threats at face value and don't realize that it's just a tiny man behind the curtain. You know, to borrow one of my favorite quotes from The Wizard of Oz, from the Wicked Witch of the West, when Dorothy is running with her minions that used to be on her side, she says, "Somebody always helps that girl." Well, it's kind of been like a secret motto of mine. I started off going on 7 years ago now with no lawyer, very, very afraid and uncertain as to what may come next, but knowing that I could not live with myself if I didn't do what was right, what was facing me. As insignificant as I wanted to believe that I was, I realized that I had a role to confront the injustice that came into my life, and I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. So I encourage this woman to understand that there is an army of support out there for her when and if she decides to come forward and bring criminal charges, to press charges, to file a complaint that will be pursued through the criminal avenues, to possibly bring civil action if it is warranted. There are so many people out there that are going to come to your defense. I think I can all but guarantee that you will get free legal aid in this fight. I'm not suggesting that it will be easy, but I am suggesting, like the Wizard of Oz line says, that somebody will always help that girl. I have witnessed it. I have lived it. I started off alone, not knowing the path that I was going to be charting. I did it for a year with no lawyer. And little by little, I grew a massive team that eventually entirely defeated these weaponized contracts that they were trying to intimidate me with in the first place. I annihilated the mechanism that they were trying to bully me with, not just for myself, but for every single staffer that signed the same illegal non-disclosure agreement. So if you can do anything, use me as an example for what you can do to stare these bullies down. I understand we are in uncharted territory with a candidate for president of the United States inciting violence regularly against those who criticize him or challenge him in any way, and inciting violence amongst his own supporters. But if I can share a very important lesson out of this book that's in my hand, it's On Tyranny from Timothy Snyder, Yale historian. This is so, so important. We are living in a very unique but not uncharted place in American history, this precious window where we still have our rights if we are brave enough and bright enough to keep them in the next 67 days. We can't afford to lose them. Every one of us that has an opportunity to confront this oppression and this illegality has to do it. Here's this sweet little, short little lesson from Timothy Snyder. Do not obey in advance. Most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. In times like these, individuals think ahead about what a more repressive government will want and then offer themselves without being asked. A citizen who adapts in this way is teaching power what it can do. So, my friend, I hope you're listening. I hope you understand your very important role in history, that what you do in this case is teaching power what it can do. And therefore, your actions are so incredibly important. Like I said, the earth will help the woman. We will come to your defense. There is so much support out here for you. I'm sure it can manifest itself in the form of legal help if you need it. I've seen GoFundMe's raise so much money for people in your situation. I just encourage you to be brave and not let a physical or verbal assault, what is presumably not only a violation of assault and battery laws, but actually a federal crime to assault a federal worker like you are, like this cemetery worker is. Please avail yourself of every civil and criminal remedy at your disposal. Please. And we thank you and we support you. And I know I'm just going to look at the comments after this show to see the outpouring of support there is for you, because I know it will be overwhelming. And these are just bullies, tiny little men hiding behind curtains that want you to believe that they have any power whatsoever. They have none. So we have a great show for you today. I'm actually going to kind of bring it full circle with what put Donald Trump on those hallowed graves in the first place, this sick exploitation of fallen service members for a debacle that he himself is responsible for. He himself set up the devastating withdrawal from Afghanistan that Biden could not roll back by kowtowing to the Taliban, who, by the way, this very week are instituting draconian, sick, regressive rules for women in Afghanistan. And speaking of bravery and not obeying in advance, my goodness, look at the bravery of the Afghan women. We're absolutely going to talk about that today as an example of how we can be brave in our own lives. But let's just start. Let's start with, my goodness, some of the sickness, the true sickness. I mean, this is not, we're going to talk about the CNN interview last night with Vice President Harris. I mean, these things seem like these constraints of analyzing a candidate's interview on policy are so friggin' outdated and not applicable to totally insane campaign we're dealing with, where we have one normal candidate, good faith, policy driven candidate, and another felon who is found civilly liable for violating women, and his disgusting acolytes and daily mental health episodes from this candidate on the other side. But let's just talk about how low it got this week. I mentioned earlier, and I'm not gonna quote it. We're gonna keep this clean, family friendly. But Donald Trump reposted a photo on his social media of Vice President Harris and Hillary Clinton, suggesting that a very crude act got them to their careers. Sick man. You sick man who went around the country with Jeffrey Epstein, who was molesting young girls on his plane, who has had a very serious complaint filed by a woman named Katie Johnson years ago, who mysteriously just withdrew her lawsuit and disappeared from the public eye. I wonder why. This is anybody who thinks that maybe their grocery store prices are going to go down, and so they're going to vote for a man like this. First of all, he's not good for the economy. Kamala Harris corrected a lot of those misconceptions in that very skewed interview last night on CNN. But there's nothing that can justify putting a man like this in power. Some other really dangerous omens that he reposted earlier that we should just be constantly shining a light on. It's most certainly the objective of my platform to express to you how I lived a version of political persecution that is going to be so much worse. God forbid we give this man power again. On Wednesday, he was reposting on his Untruth social account AI images of his perceived enemies in orange jumpsuits, calls for the indictment of the members of the January 6th Select Committee, a call for the arrest of Jack Smith, a call for military tribunals for President Obama and others. And we're supposed to believe that Project 2025 and its obliteration of the Justice Department for the service of their dear leader has nothing to do with the Trump campaign. Don't believe your lying eyes when Donald Trump tells you out of his own mouth and his own tweeting fingers what he wants to do. Now, he's not alone. We talk about this all the time. He's propped up by really intellectually dishonest, disgusting, repulsive people like J.D. Vance, his running mate. We could just go on and on and on about how much disrespect this man has for women and how flagrant he is in expressing that. He, in advance of the CNN interview, he put, "I have gotten a hold of the full Kamala Harris CNN interview," and posted that ages-old viral clip of a South Carolina Miss America pageant contestant totally losing it in trying to answer a question on world affairs, not knowing what to say. And what we had up to there a minute ago is actually Shannon Watts, the advocate for gun violence reforms, pointing out that was Katie Upton, who tragically, women, my God almighty, wake up, who was once represented by Donald Trump's modeling agency and is to this day apparently a Trump supporter. She had said that she contemplated suicide after that clip went viral. So JD Vance reposted that clip today with the sick, jealous suggestion that would be the substance of Kamala Harris's interview. Now we're going to get to Kamala Harris's interview in a minute. As I mentioned, I think it's ridiculous, these constructs that we're putting on this campaign and not talking about the actual split screen that we have. But I want to, before we do that, talk about one other guy who is propping up these disgusting tiny men, who is a tiny man himself, who should frankly be taken off the air like yesterday. I'm going to tell you, years ago, when I watched Fox News, I talk a lot about the angel voices, okay, the intuitions that were telling me that these people that I was listening to, that I was allowing to fearmonger me and brainwash me for so many years, were not good people. I dismissed these angel voices, but some of the strongest intuitions, the strongest nudges that I got were when I would watch Bill O'Reilly. Okay. I knew that Bill O'Reilly was a POS. Okay. I knew he was a scumbag, excuse me. And of course, he is now off the air because he was, found to have engaged in sexual misconduct that the network apparently could not tolerate. Well, guess who was the heir apparent of Bill O'Reilly and his kind of little, man on the street interviewer when he had his show? Jesse Waters. Jesse Waters. Really, really disgusting guy. As much as I believed his propaganda, I was with one breath believing his propaganda and with another breath being disgusted at his overt misogyny that I recognized even as a full-fledged Trump supporter / right-wing media acolyte. Listen to those instincts. If anybody is out there and is having these doubts, if there is a doubt, there is a reason for it. Listen to it. So what do? They prop up this Jesse Waters, this disgusting man who, God help his mother, apparently seems to be quite lucid and in tune with what's right herself and tries to help her son all the time, but he's not listening. This is Jesse Waters this week on primetime show The Five.
This is where the president has his most impact. You have a lot of room to maneuver there as commander-in-chief. We don't know who she is. We don't know what she believes. She's going to get paralyzed in the Situation Room while the generals have their way with her. Right now,
Jesse Waters.
Jesse, I don't like that.
Figuratively,
Take
again,
it back.
Have their way with her. Control her. Not in a sexual way.
Nobody believes that he didn't mean it in a sexual way. He obviously did. He made very overt gestures about Ivanka Trump back during the Trump years. In a complimentary way, really kind of, I can't even bringing this up just makes me sick to my stomach. This man is disgusting. This is the kind of person that they have trying to shape the minds of millions of Americans on a daily basis. This guy. All right. So speaking of Kamala Harris and the interview that J.D. Vance tried to disparage in advance, of course, Kamala Harris pretty much hit it out of the park. Can you even imagine Donald Trump sitting down to an interview on policy, which, by the way, this was an interview where Dana Bash of CNN basically threw at her every possible Trump hit, MAGA hit, accused her of flip-flopping, brought up one time that Tim Walz misspoke. Every hit that you have been seeing against Harris and Walz from MAGA is basically what the CNN interview consisted of last night. And yet Kamala Harris is answered questions on substance with, she corrected this improper framing of the economy that is just incessant. They just I guess we just have this all collective amnesia that we went through a pandemic that was terribly botched by Donald Trump. He destroyed our economy, and that Biden and Harris came in and had to rescue America from the absolute disaster that Donald Trump caused, how much national debt he racked up, how many jobs this administration has created, how low child poverty is, how low our inflation rate is in comparison with the rest of the world, how historic the bounce back of this economy is, and how they continue to fight corporate greed. There is nothing negative in this economy to be blamed on Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, but there are many, many things that Trump did to cause suffering among the American people. So Kamala Harris answered these questions with substance. She had made an emphasis in this interview on character. She dismissed this tired attack on her race. It was really good. She basically said it's a tired old playbook, and Dana Bash tried to push her on it, and she's like, that's it. I'm not even going to give it the time of day. Good for her. Donald Trump could have never given an interview anywhere near the level that Kamala Harris did in that interview. Mind you, terrible, terrible framing. I don't know who came up with this setting, whether it was the Harris campaign or CNN. Terrible framing. You know, you got Kamala Harris behind some little, what looks like lunch table on one side, awkwardly between vice presidential candidate Waltz and Dana Bash. I really, really kind of awful framing there, but on substance, with one exception that we'll mention much later in the show. I was, obviously impressed, not surprised, because I know the caliber of this woman. But I want to do a kind of a split screen. It's kind of what I want to call today the tale of two bacons. So we've got both candidates talking about bacon for different reasons. Here is Donald Trump talking about bacon. Where is the constant outrage on this man's age/mental decline that we had for Joe Biden a month and a half ago? This guy needs some help. Here you go.
You take a look at bacon and some of these products, and some people don't eat bacon anymore. And we are going to get the energy prices down. When we get energy down, this was caused by their horrible energy wind. They want wind all over the place. But when it doesn't blow, we have a little problem.
All right. There's Trump on bacon and wind. I mean, if you can put that all together. By the way, proud vegan here. If bacon prices are too high for the moment, just, do some plant-based options. You get some vegetables, get some pasta. You don't have to eat bacon. You can still eat amazing, amazing food. I've got some amazing fake fried eggs and fake cheese in my refrigerator over there. You can make some amazing plant-based options, so you don't have to eat bacon. But I'm with Tim Walz's daughter. I don't know if you guys remember that funny clip from the DNC, but they were out somewhere, and he's like, "We're going to go get a corn dog." And she's like, "I'm vegetarian." And he's like, "Oh, turkey." And she's like, that's meat, Dad." So look, we don't have the exact same positions on everything. Okay. And in my perfect world, we would all not be consuming these precious animals that suffer so much. But hey, I understand that they are acting in good faith for this country on so many issues. So here's Kamala Harris talking about bacon. Very, very different context. And the reason I pulled this clip is because it goes to character. Once again, it goes to the selflessness of a leader who is not looking out for themselves every single minute like Donald Trump is. And it goes to some real emotions and feelings that I had on this particular day, which you're going to hear Kamala Harris talk about when she got the news from President Biden that he was going to drop out of the race. Now, I just want to say you're damn lucky, CNN, for getting this story from her in this interview. Here it is.
Staying on President Biden, when he called you and said he was pulling out of the race, what was that like? And did he offer to endorse you right away, or did you ask for it?
It was a Sunday, so here, I'll give you a little too much information.
Go for it. There's no such thing, Madam Vice President.
My family was staying with us, and including my baby nieces. And we had just had pancakes and, Auntie, can I have more bacon? Yes, I'll make you more bacon. And then we were sitting down to do a puzzle. And the phone rang, and it was Joe Biden. And he told me what he had decided to do. And I asked him, "Are you sure?" And he said yes. And that's how I learned about it.
And what about the endorsement? Did you ask for it?
He was very clear that he was going to support me.
So when he called to tell you, he said, "I'm pulling out of the race and I'm going to support you."
Well, my first thought was not about me, to be honest with you. My first thought was about him, to be honest. I think history is going to show a number of things about Joe Biden's presidency. I think history is going to show that in so many ways it was transformative, be it on what we have accomplished around finally investing in America's infrastructure, investing in new economies, in new industries, what we have done to bring our allies back together and have confidence in who we are as America and grow that alliance, what we have done to stand true to our principles, including one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I think history is going to show not only has Joe Biden led an administration that has achieved those extraordinary successes, but the character of the man is one that he has been in his life and career, including as a president, quite selfless and puts the American people.
I really, really love that story because you could see even before Dana Bash asked her specifically, like, did he endorse you? Was he? She's like, I wasn't thinking about myself. I wasn't thinking about I wasn't worried about myself in that moment. I was worried about him. And I'm writing about it now, but I had a very emotional reaction the day that the day that President Biden decided to drop out of the race. It was like initially like anger followed by like deep, deep sadness. And then, by the end of the day, joy to see all this rallying around Kamala Harris. But I could see that sadness in her because she loved and honored and respected this man so much and what he has done for the country. And this is obviously the theme. This is the contrast, the service, the selflessness of this ticket and the administration that she's part of versus Donald Trump, who is literally running a presidential campaign for self-preservation, to stay out of jail, to make these cases that he has disgustingly had success in delaying and scuttling through up to our Supreme Court of the United States, to have them go away entirely. That is what his presidential run is for one man to stay out of prison and not be held accountable for his many, many crimes. Before we go to break today, I'm going to take just a couple minutes on the latest Trump legal news. First of all, we just got news that a federal judge has rejected Donald Trump's effort to have his case, the hush money case, removed to federal court. This was his latest bid to delay sentencing, which is currently scheduled for September 18th. The judge rejected it on a technical matter. He could technically bring it back, but as for now, it stays in state court. This same federal court had rejected this earlier effort. Of course, now Trump is trying to use this disgusting extra constitutional ruling out of the Supreme Court to get this entire case thrown out. But that was the premise upon which he was trying to get it removed to federal court. That for now is rejected. For now, Judge Juan Merchan in New York will rule on other pending motions on September 16th. And as for now, sentencing is scheduled to go forward on September 18th. Sorry, little man Donald Trump. There's also, of course, huge news this week with the superseding indictment from Jack Smith. He rewrote this indictment to deal with this insane ruling from the Supreme Court. This is now the fifth grand jury of American citizens to indict Donald Trump. He did a lot to reframe Donald Trump's illegal acts as a campaigner who happens to be president versus a president conducting official acts. I mean, this is insane that any of these crimes that Donald Trump is charged with in the January 6th case could be construed as official acts. The whole notion is ridiculous. But in keeping to not get this case, to salvage this case, and at least what we're dealing with this corrupt Supreme Court until we address that five-alarm fire, Jack Smith is trying to salvage this case. I highly recommend a friend of mine, Allison Gill, going to her website, MullerSheWrote.com. She did an excellent strike through of the previous indictment with the new indictment, showing what came out, what went in, and her commentary on why Smith made the changes that he made. by one example, some of the conversations about purported election fraud between Trump and his White House chief of staff have been taken out, but his pleadings with then Vice President Mike Pence to block the certification of Joe Biden's election victory remained. One thing that Jack Smith was forced to remove based on this extra constitutional ruling from the Supreme Court was his pressuring of DOJ officials to back his claims of election fraud, that whole episode with Jeffrey Clark trying to put him in as Attorney General. But even with Smith paring down this indictment from 45 to 36 pages, there's still the same four charges that Trump faces: conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to obstruct an official proceeding, obstructing a congressional proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. This man is a conspirator against the rights of we the people. If he is reelected, he will not be held accountable. Could not be more serious. And then, of course, we finally this week got the appeal from Jack Smith of this off the rails judge in South Florida, Eileen Cannon, throwing out this classified documents case. This could finally, now Jack Smith did not specifically ask for it, but God Almighty, I hope the 11th Circuit does it of their own accord. This could finally lead to her removal from the case. Should have never been on it in the first place. They have the ability, even though Jack Smith did not specifically ask for it, to remove Eileen Cannon for once and for all. This 100% biased, incompetent, frankly dangerous to national security judge who is probably just auditioning for a seat on Donald Trump's Supreme Court. So there's that. These wheels are turning. Sick situation that we're not going to see any of these trials before the election, but we have one hope to see them ever, and that's by electing Kamala Harris to be president. Okay, we're going to take a quick break for our sponsor, and then we're going to really dive in to what happened at Arlington National Cemetery, plus go to Afghanistan, what's happening with the Taliban, and I've got some words about the Middle East and a special musical surprise for you at the very end, so stick around. All right, so let's go to Arlington National Cemetery. Of course, Donald Trump, I know it well. I saw him do it in 2016. He exploits suffering, grieving families. He did it with the so-called angel moms. He does it to this day. The quote-unquote angel moms are the parents and mothers of people who have been killed by undocumented people in this country. Again, this is just an exploitation of grievance and real pain for his own political gain. The crimes amongst documented legal citizens are much, much higher than those committed by undocumented people in this country. Now, so this week, he was exploiting the pain of a disaster that he caused, which we're going to get to in a minute, by creating a campaign photo op on the grounds of Arlington National Cemetery. I mean, look at him there with his thumb up. Who goes to a hallowed gravesite and takes a picture with his thumbs up? Now, we got this reporting, as I mentioned earlier in the week, from NPR. They broke the story. We have learned so much since then, which is namely, very importantly, that ahead of the visit, Trump campaign staff was given a document detailing laws and regulations that they needed to follow while they were there that, quote, prohibit political campaign or election-related activities. This document, which was obtained, I think, by military.com, says, quote, photographers, content creators, or any other persons attending for purposes or in direct support of a partisan political candidate's campaign are not, in capital letters, permitted on the ANC installation. So what does Donald Trump do before we learn of the altercation? Donald Trump's campaign puts out a TikTok video and photos of this event on his TikTok account, his campaign co-chair's account, and a campaign fundraising email from Utah's governor, who, by the way, has been the sole actor that I'm aware of in this scenario who has come forward to apologize. The Army came forward after these six statements from Stephen Chung, who, by the way, I learned in my lawsuit years later. Okay, in 2016, all I did was pass this guy in the hallway and see his visage, okay, whatever. And that was the extent of my interactions with this guy, Stephen Chung, in 2016. I learned years later that some of the most outrageous defamation that was leveled against me during that campaign in 2016 was fueled by Stephen Chung. This guy. I know how closely this man aligns himself with the truth, and that is not at all. Truth means nothing to this man, and it is why Donald Trump has elevated him to the position of campaign spokesperson in this election. So, as I mentioned, they come out of the gate, Chris LaCivita calling the person who we don't know is a woman yet despicable. Stephen Chung says she's having a mental health episode. The projection is really, really rich from these people. And then we get pushback from the Army, which is incredibly rare. The Army does not issue public statements like this frequently. And they, in this statement, say that the employee of the Arlington National Cemetery, quote, acted with professionalism when she sought to remind the campaign about federal laws and policies banning political activities. And then they say, quote, an ANC employee who attempted to ensure adherence to these rules was abruptly pushed aside. They went on to say this incident was unfortunate, and it is also unfortunate that the ANC employee and her professionalism has been unfairly attacked. ANC is a national shrine to the honored dead of the armed forces, and its dedicated staff will continue to ensure public ceremonies are conducted with the dignity and respect the nation's fallen deserves. The level, the amount of dishonor and disgrace in this episode is just off the charts. We cannot let go of this situation. We cannot fail to demand accountability. There is a growing demand from Democrats and Democrat pro-democracy supporters for the Democrats in power to be very forceful in their demand that questions be answered. There is basically oversight from the Senate and House Armed Services Committee. Senator Tim Kaine and Representative Jerry Connolly, both Democrats of Virginia and respective members of those committees, have called on the Army to provide the report and release more information. I'm absolutely echoing that call. We need to know answers to so many questions. How violent was this attack? Very, very important, who on Trump's campaign staff did this? What exactly did they tell the Trump campaign officials? What precise laws were broken? And we obviously know that the cemetery officials believe laws were broken. When and how did they conclude that? We need answers to all of these questions. I hope that this woman, as I mentioned at the top, finds the courage to come forward, bring these charges, and the Army as well is fully transparent with the American people in honor and respect of their own members who have been so disgustingly exploited by Donald Trump and his campaign and violated once again. We need full transparency on this. Donald Trump, it's so sad. It's so sad. You see the family of this one fallen Afghanistan soldier coming to his defense, and that's what they trotted out there. They basically, Donald Trump threw the family under the bus, blamed the family on the whole incident when he's literally constructing a whole social media campaign based on the event. But he blames it on the family. God help these poor, duped families who come out and support him. Well, not all the families are so duped, and they are coming out and saying, absolutely, we have no tolerance for this. If you put that picture back up, that circle is around the grave site of Sergeant Andrew Marcassano. And Jeremy, if we can put that picture with Donald Trump and the other family over the grave site, that circle is around for our video watchers today around the gravesite of Sergeant Andrew Marcassano, and his family issued a statement saying, according to our conversations with Arlington National Cemetery, the Trump campaign staffers did not adhere to the rules that were set in place for this visit to Staff Sergeant Hoover's gravesite in Section 60, which lays directly next to my brother's grave. And his sister continued, we hope that those visiting this sacred site understand that these were real people who sacrificed for our freedom, and that they are honored and respected accordingly. Of course, you have this whole spectacle being conducted by a man who used the excuse of bone spurs to not serve himself, who has denigrated our servicemen as suckers and losers, who has said that the Presidential Medal of Freedom is better than the Congressional Medal of Honor because that's given to people who, frankly, I guess just don't look so great anymore because maybe they lost a limb in service. This is the sick disgrace of the man who coordinated this stunt. Every criminal and civil avenue of accountability must be pursued. So how do we even get here? How do we get here? We got here because Donald Trump, as president, negotiated a withdrawal of Afghanistan with the Taliban. When the Afghans were in power, when they were trying to, there was this fledgling possibility of the Afghans maintaining control of their own country and not having it taken over by the Taliban. He completely throws the Afghan government under the bus, invites the Taliban to Camp David, and releases 5,000 Taliban prisoners in the lead up to agreeing to completely withdraw our forces from Afghanistan. He was told by the Pentagon that we needed at least 4,000 troops for a safe withdrawal. What does Trump do? He orders the withdrawal of all but 2,500 troops. Now, this week, one of his former, because of course it was a constant revolving door of staff in his White House because nobody could last because it was such a destructive environment. But one of his national security advisors, H.R. McMaster, came out this week with a book called At War with Ourselves. I have some thoughts on that title, but here's H.R. McMaster explaining who, in fact, holds responsibility for the debacle in Afghanistan.
Does Trump bear part of the responsibility for what happened?
Oh, yes. I mean, so the whole premise of talking to the Taliban before you leave Afghanistan, why the heck were we even doing that?
He was going to invite them to Camp David.
Right. Even the Obama administration, when they made the mistake of pulling all of our troops out of Iraq in 2010, which really set conditions for the rise of ISIS and so forth by 2014, the Obama administration didn't negotiate with al-Qaeda in Iraq on the way out. And so if we were going to leave, why not just leave? What happened in these series of negotiations and concessions to the Taliban is we kind of threw the Afghans under the bus on the way out.
And they cut the...
Yes, 100%, 100%. The blood is on the hands of Donald Trump for this scenario. But, don't believe your lying eyes. Forget history. Just listen to the propaganda machine and our poor, duped, suffering families that we have drug along on our campaign to exploit grievances. Disgusting, disgusting. If you bring this full circle to where we are today, it's so interesting, as I mentioned at the top, the threads that are coming together, because just this week, devastating news for the women of Afghanistan. The Taliban has instituted these, what are being called dystopian new laws that forbid women from speaking or showing any part of their bodies in public. This is, obviously seen as gender apartheid. It's enforced by the country's hardline Islamist rulers. This is the first set of official rules that they've put out since their takeover of the country in 2021, and they do it under the guise, oh my God, you don't know how much this sounds to me like MAGA. They do it under the guise of preventing vice and promoting virtue. How many regressive, oppressive moves are MAGA and Project 2025 and J.D. Vance, sicko, anti-family, anti-woman man promoting in the aim of, quote unquote, preventing vice and promoting virtue in his sick, regressive construct of what a family should be, forced familyhood. It's the same playbook, the same anti-Christian, but in the name of Christian playbook. In this case, in the name of Islam. I mean, it's all religions have their version of exploiting faith and true worship and morality for the worst of humanity. So Islam does it. Netanyahu does it. Christians, so-called, who aren't Christians, do it. Everybody does this, exploiting faith and values for oppression. It's age-old. So anyway, these women in Afghanistan are fighting back. And by the way, so brave, because I want to tell you what some of the penalties for violating these rules of not speaking or singing or showing their face in public, they include, these are penalties, quote, advice, warnings of divine punishment, verbal threats, confiscation of property, detention for 1 hour to 3 days in public jails, and any other punishment deemed appropriate. That last part should scare the hell out of anyone. And yet, these Afghan women, they don't have the luxury of not obeying in advance. Their rights have already been taken away, but they're not obeying anyway. And they are putting out videos of them singing, of them going out in public without their face covered. God bless these women. We need to shine as much light on this situation as we do on anyone, and understand the real culpable actors in our country who are responsible for this devastating step backwards for the Afghan people of Afghanistan. It's really, really sad. Now, I'm going to take a few minutes before we end and before we get to the musical outro, which I know you're going to enjoy so much, to talk about what is going on in the Middle East. This is another tiny man. The theme of my show today is tiny men who pretend to be powerful, who pretend to have any kind of ability to scare or intimidate or control others. They really don't have any of it. It's only what we give them. And we're giving way, way, way too much to Benjamin Netanyahu. This week, he has continued his campaign of ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people in the West Bank in a way that it had not been, at a degree that had not been executed before. There is nearly 1,000 now killed in the West Bank and nearly 41,000 killed in Gaza. If anybody is looking at this, if we look at what's happening in Ukraine with Vladimir Putin, and we can call that genocide and we can call that war crimes, and thousands less people have been killed, thousands less children and mothers, fathers, brothers, caring people who are not terrorists, how can we look at what is going on in the Middle East and not condemn it in the same terms? I was watching earlier this week a clip on Ayman Mohyeldin. Actually, he was in for Alex Wagner. And God bless him. God bless any journalist out there who has the moral clarity right now. And there's a few of them. I would put Ayman in that group, Joy Reid, Chris Hayes. God bless them for shining a light on an issue that is inconvenient for so many. It is inconvenient for so many. For some reason, we are afraid to tackle this issue. We shouldn't be afraid. Handling it in the right way is in the benefit of the American people, the Israeli people, Jewish people, Islamic people, Palestinian people. It's good for the whole world to not fund the war crimes of Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a tiny man like Donald Trump, just trying to stay in power. So anyway, Ayman Mohyeldin is just sitting in for Alex Wagner, interviews a man about these escalating raids in the West Bank, and apparently goes 1 minute over time. 1 minute over time. And he does the toss off to Lawrence O'Donnell. And Lawrence O'Donnell scolds him. I don't know if any of you guys saw this, but he scolds him for going 1 minute overtime. And I thought, wow, that was kind of a tiny man move by Lawrence O'Donnell, who, don't get me wrong, has some excellent commentary sometimes. A lot of weeks I think, you know what? You and me, Lawrence, we're on the same page. Most certainly in the weeks when there was so much pressure on Biden, I and many others appreciated his commentary. But I really think that Lawrence O'Donnell should apologize to Ayman Mohadeen. And you know what? I'm doing this, calling out Lawrence O'Donnell on this. When Lawrence O'Donnell actually did something to me 3 years ago that I have not called out to this day. And that is that he reported on my victory, my massive court precedent setting victory against Donald Trump's oppressive NDAs without even uttering my name. He had my lawyer on his show, did a segment with my lawyer, and he could not even muster my name. He said, that plaintiff or this plaintiff. Can you imagine how Lawrence O'Donnell might feel if somebody did that to him? I know you can do better, Lawrence O'Donnell. I know you can do better to me, to any woman in my position, and I know you can do better to Ayman Mohadeen and the suffering people in Israel and Palestine, Gaza, the West Bank, and around the world. I think we can spare a little more than a minute for a catastrophe like this. So please, Lawrence, you got a lot of fans out there, a lot of people that appreciate you, a lot of people that look to you, just like a lot of people look to Fox News. You're supposed to be the flip side of the coin. Do better. So I just want to end this show before we get to the music with a op-ed from Mark Ruffalo, who is a wonderful actor, human rights activist, very active in democratic politics for many years. And he wrote an op-ed last weekend talking about why. And I don't think this is something that we should think is so beyond our reach or too much to demand. This, we absolutely should be demanding that the United States control its flow of military aid to Israel that is being used to commit these war crimes. Mark Ruffalo writes, with at least 40,000 Gazans killed by Israel's offensive so far, seemingly constant reports of fresh bombardments of civilians with U.S. arms have made a mockery of the administration's claims of concern for human rights. If Israel's provocative measures abroad, like its assassination of Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, with whom it was negotiating to end hostilities and return of Israeli hostages, seem intended to sabotage ceasefire talks and draw the United States into a larger regional conflict. Such a war could be fought for years with untold further civilian casualties. But it's not too late for Biden in the final months of his term to act boldly. Freed from some political considerations because he is not running for re-election, he could use the necessary political capital to finally pressure Netanyahu into accepting a permanent ceasefire deal. If Biden acts swiftly and decisively, he could preserve his legacy as a statesman by ending the months of cruelty in Gaza, calming regional tensions, and protecting the possibility of a two-state solution. And then he goes on to talk about how this is also key to ensuring a Harris win. If a permanent ceasefire were achieved, just like bringing those hostages home, those political prisoners home from Russia. And I understand things are going on in the background that I don't know about, but I also understand that you can't talk about just wanting a deal, pushing for a deal, when your main apparatus of leverage, you're just handing over to a man who has no incentive for a deal whatsoever. We have to stop funding it. We have to use the leverage that we have and end these sick, sick criminal attacks on the Palestinian people and obviously bring home the hostages. Benjamin Netanyahu cares nothing for his hostages. I get most of my news, by the way, from Haaretz. If you don't subscribe to Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, I highly suggest it. Every single day, the headlines out of Haaretz paint this situation the way it is. And they are the most critical of Benjamin Netanyahu and his campaign for self-preservation, how he knew October 7th he was warned about it. And he didn't do anything about it because he didn't want to, because war is good for a man like him, just like war is good for a man like Donald Trump. These tiny men and the pain that they're causing, we should have zero tolerance for it. All right, guys, I'm so grateful as always that you joined me today. We're going to end on a light note. If you pay close attention to Lights On, you know that we've had Jasmine Crockett on the show several times. We had her again this week. Highly suggest going and checking out that interview. She talked about some things that you didn't hear in her DNC speech. Really, really special. But my previous interview with Jasmine Crockett, we had a very special guest on the show. It was Tennessee Brando, who of course wrote that brilliant B6 song that went viral. And in the wake of that, if you haven't heard it before, Tennessee Brando actually asked me if I would write another song with him. And this song happened to be inspired by a speech that Eric Swalwell gave in Congress, where he did this kind of repetition of lines and said, if you do this, you might be in a cult. If you do this, you might be in a cult. So Tennessee Brando and I wrote the song. We have released it previously on Twitter, and we did a video on my YouTube channel, but we have not released until recently the band version of You Might Be in a Cult. I may be a little bit partial, but I think this sounds frankly amazing. I think they should play this song on the radio. So if you haven't heard it yet, here is the band version of You Might Be in a Cult. By the way, you can download it on Bandcamp now. It's available for download, so definitely check it out, share it there, download it. Here is You Might Be in a Cult with Tennessee Brando, written by yours truly and Tennessee Brando.
Now if you think that the president set up his own son to hide the crimes you think his family done, all to justify the charges against Trump, you think everything's rigged and it's all made up. Well, I'm sorry to say, you might be in a cult. And if you go to a rally and you're fainting out in the heat, and your guy starts to cry, hey, now what about me? And then he spits right out without missing a beat. I don't care about you, I just want your vote. I'm beginning to think you might be in a cult. Come on, he's a felon, now don't you know? There's 37 countries where he can't go. Mexico, Macau, and South Korea, Turkey, Taiwan, and Tanzania. And now you want to make this man your nominee. When we see you back the blue till they come for your guy. You want to defund the DOJ and the FBI. And you say you're the rule of law. We know that's a lie. You got the Constitution all twisted up. It sure looks like you might be in a cult. He spurs your rage and he fuels your hate. And you think somehow you're gonna make America great. Well, you're no patriot, you're just lining up for the Kool-Aid. I think it's high time you all wake up. I'm sorry, my friend, you're damn sure in a cult.
All right, everybody. Hope you enjoy that as much as I do. As always, you can support my ongoing legal battle by going to thejessicadenson.com/donate, subscribing to Lights On with Jessica Denson wherever you get your audio podcasts, and subscribing to my YouTube channel, Jessica Denson, where you can find that very special first recording of You Might Be in a Cult. Okay, everybody, thank you so much, as always, for spending this hour with me. I love you so much. I'm so honored by your company. Have a wonderful weekend, and let your light shine.